So, with both Death Battle Season 10 and the Tournament of Champions coming to an end, I thought it would be fun to call upon our good friend Apollo and have him grant me the gift of prophecy so that I can attempt to predict what matchups we may see in Season 11. So, how this is going to work is I have a list, and on this list is a bunch of matchups that have yet to happen. So, I will be going over each of these matchups and see which episodes I think will or will not happen, or which matchups I could logically see happening in the next season. So, without further ado, let's start predicting. For starters, we have to talk about the winner of the Tournament of Champions, Wile E. Coyote versus Tomcat. Since we already know this episode is happening, I will instead try to predict where it will go in the season lineup. It'll probably go in the middle. Either that, or it's taking the episode 200 spot, but I don't really see that happening, especially with two other matchups I want to talk about later. Now that we have that out of the way, let's start guessing some actual episodes. Starting off, we gotta talk about these three images. The first one is from the ending to Galactus vs. Unicron, showing 3 different tarot cards. The second one is the Family Feud logo, and finally, the third one is Goku and Superman playing with action figures. That's pretty neat. So, starting off with the tarot cards, we get 3 different types: the Fool, Death, and the World. Now, call me a skeptic, but I believe that these cards are hinting towards Joker vs. Giorno. In the last 3 Persona games, every protagonist has been represented by the Fool Arcana, which was one of the cards shown here. Death could just represent Death Battle, and the World could just represent Giorno, because his father is Dio, and Dio's stand was, you guessed it, the World. Done. Easy peasy. Bing bang boom. This is hinting towards Joker vs. Giorno. Moving on to the Family Feud image, and I'm gonna be honest, this next matchup was one that I actually predicted prior to the release of Galactus vs. Unicron, and that matchup is Kazuya Mishima versus Albert Wesker. Seriously, I predicted this before I saw anyone else start predicting this. Don't believe me? Here's proof. Yes, that is my official Twitter account, which you should totally go follow, by the way. Anyway, back on track. Yeah, considering Kazuya's family is, let's just say, really competitive amongst each other, the Family Feud logo makes sense. Also, Tekken 8 is coming out pretty soon, at the time of writing this at least, and Resident Evil 4 Remake came out this year, so now would be a good time to do it. Now we get to the final image before getting into actual speculation. In this image, we see Goku and Superman playing with action figures in the Space Arcade from Rick vs. the Doctor. And judging by what is here, we can determine the 3 matchups that could potentially happen next season. The first one being Indominus Rex vs. Sharktopus, since Goku and Superman are playing with dinosaur toys. Pretty base, not gonna lie, Wiz. The second being, oh god, this is a mouthful, Haruhi Suzumiya versus Hatsune Miku. Not much to say about this one, outside of the fact that they're here in doll form, and yeah, that's about it. And finally, we see Master Chief and Doomslayer in the top left corner, clearly hinting at the fact that Chief vs. Slayer will happen next season. Side note, they look like they're about to go flash someone, and that thought is both hilarious and sickening. Finally, after all that, we get into unknown territory. These first few matchups are ones I'm very confident in happening next season, and the matchup I want to start off this prediction with is King Ghidorah versus Deathwing. Not only was the episode on the Champions Bout in 2022 clearly showing that people really want it, but next year is quite literally the perfect time to do it. Why, you may ask? Well, not only is Godzilla Kong the New Empire coming out next year, but it's also the Godzilla franchise's 70th anniversary and the 60th anniversary of Ghidorah's first movie appearance. And to top it all off, it is also World of Warcraft's 20th anniversary next year. Like, that can't be a coincidence, can it? The stars have quite literally aligned. Also, King Ghidorah versus Deathwing could happen. So yeah, I definitely think this episode will happen next season. Next up on the list, we got Han Solo versus Captain Kirk. Look, since Season 7, we have gotten a Star Wars episode every single season. For Season 8, it was Yoda versus King Mickey, for Season 9, it was Boba Fett versus Predator, and for Season 10, it was Vader versus Obito. So next season, I feel like we'll be getting Han versus Kirk. Not only does it bring a new series into Death Battle, that being Star Trek, but it's also a highly requested matchup that a lot of people want. And honestly, I'd be down for more non-Jedi/Sith episodes on Death Battle. But let's be real, episodes like Luke vs. Saber and Sheev vs. Xehanort are still very possible too. I just chose this one because I think personally it has a higher chance. The next matchup I want to talk about is Captain America vs. Kamen Rider Ichigo. So, not only was this matchup on last year's ballot, not only is Kamen Rider a new series on Death Battle that's highly requested, but I think Death Battle have tipped their hand a bit too far. Why, you may ask? Well, in the commentary video for Batman vs. Captain America, Ben literally said, and I quote, "Alright, first time we did Cap." I don't know about you, but the way that was worded makes it sound like they're planning on using Steve again sometime in the future. Maybe for next season, perhaps? And of course, he's going to be fighting Kamen Rider Ichigo. That's like his most highly requested matchup. Finally, for the last matchup I'm very confident in, we have Archie Knuckles versus Juggernaut. So, this matchup is very highly requested among the community, and it also had a very successful Death Battle cast. Not to mention, in one of the Fireside chats, Ben did say that he would love to do it again, but just not for Season 10, since Trunks vs. Silver happened a season prior, which leads me to believe that this matchup will happen either this season or next season. Plus, given the revisions for the Archie Sonic cosmology we got recently, yeah, I think now is the time to do the matchup. Now, these next three matchups are part of the same series, that being Invincible, and I can all see them logically happening next season, so I'll just mention all of them right now and then pick which one I think is more likely. Starting off, we have Nova vs. Invincible, Gwen Tennyson vs. Adam Eve, and Boros vs. Battle Beast. So, this is pretty obvious as to why I chose them, right? Invincible Season 2 just came out this year, and it's obviously on the minds of the people. So, out of all these matchups, which do I think is more likely? Well, for me, it's between Sam vs. Mark and Gwen vs. Eve. Now, I know some of y'all will ask why I chose Nova over Gohan, and honestly, I think it's because it's Mark's best matchup. Plus, I just like Sam. And Gohan vs. Invincible could also happen next season, but I feel like after this season and last season with the friggin' Dragon Ball, I think Dragon Ball fatigue is real, so I think they'll kind of take a step back. And to be fair, Marvel fatigue is also a bit real, but Nova hasn't really been covered before on the show, so I think they could bring in something new. Anyways, between these two matchups, I definitely think as of right now, Gwen vs. Eve is the more plausible of the two. Gwen vs. Eve had a pretty successful Death Battle cast this year in Ben Tember. Plus, a lot of people have requested it. As much as I want Nova vs. Invincible so we can get the main character of the franchise on Death Battle, Gwen vs. Eve is more likely in my opinion. Moving on to matchups I think are plausible, we got Michelangelo vs. Jay. This one had a pretty successful Death Battle cast this year, and Chad did say that he would fight for it, so I guess we'll have to wait and see if he was successful. Not only that, but Ninjago finally ended last year, and we got TMNT Mutant Mayhem, so I think now's the time to do it. Mysterio vs. Scarecrow. This is a Marvel vs. DC matchup that could very much work for a Halloween episode, what with all the creepy imagery and illusions the two could conjure up. Also, it's a Marvel vs. DC episode. It's bound to happen. Ghost Rider vs. Spawn. A highly requested matchup that, surprise surprise, got a pretty good Death Battle cast. This could also work as a Halloween episode, probably more so than Mysterio Crow. Also, we're bound to get a few Marvel matchups this year, and this is one of the big ones. Liu Kang vs. Jago. With Mortal Kombat 1 releasing this year, I could definitely see the crew wanting to cover Liu Kang on the show, given that he's basically the poster child for the series, and Jago is his best matchup, so yeah. Plus, we haven't gotten a Killer Instinct matchup in a while, so... And finally, this is gonna make me sound like a broken record, but Bowser vs. Eggman. This is definitely a contender for the big 200 milestone mark. Not only is it a legacy matchup, but it's also a Mario vs. Sonic legacy matchup. It would be pretty foolish not to do an episode on the matchup next season. Plus, both series got a lot of new installments. Mario got the movie and Mario Wonder, while Sonic got Sonic Frontiers Update 3, and Sonic Movie 3 is releasing next year, so now would be the time to do it. So to recap, the matchups I think will most likely happen this season are, in no particular order, Joker vs. Giorno, Kazuya Mishima vs. Albert Wesker, the Indominus Rex vs. Sharktopus, Haruhi Suzumiya vs. Hatsune Miku, Master Chief vs. Doomslayer, King Ghidorah vs. Deathwing, Han Solo vs. Captain Kirk, Captain America vs. Kamen Rider Ichigo, Archie Knuckles vs. Juggernaut, Gwen Tennyson vs. Adam Eve, Michelangelo vs. Jay Walker, Mysterio vs. Scarecrow, Ghost Rider vs. Spawn, Liu Kang vs. Jago, and Bowser vs. Eggman. And of course, Wile E. Coyote vs. Tomcat has won the Tournament of Champions, so that's on here as well. Now, I'm not sure where each of these would go, but I feel fairly confident in a lot of these episodes. Now, I just want to list down a few other matchups that I think definitely could happen as well, and if they do happen, then I can just say I predicted them all along. Kyle vs. Simone. Very highly requested among the community. It had a death battle cost this year, and it was on the champion ballot last year. Also, apparently there was an image resembling a Green Lantern ring at the end of Galacticron, but I didn't find that, so if you managed to find it, please let me know. The only reason I didn't want to put this here on my list is because I don't want to set myself up for the inevitable disappointment of it not happening in case it doesn't happen. I don't want this to turn into another Galacticron situation because I really like this matchup, and I really care about it. I really like Kyle. He's like one of my favorite characters in DC, and Gurren Lagann is one of my favorite anime ever. So I don't want to just like constantly set myself up for disappointment in case it doesn't happen. So that's why I didn't put it on my main list per se. Kratos vs. Ashura. This is a very popular matchup, even if Dante is better for Kratos, but I digress. And with the references to Asura's wrath in both Gogeta vs. Vegito and Scooby vs. Courage, at this point they should just do the matchup without any strings attached to it. Like, come on. Might as well. Guru vs. Megamind. Second verse, same as the first. Super popular matchup, so just do the matchup without relying on any form of tournament or something like that. Noctis vs. 2B. Final Fantasy 16 came out this year, so I could see them wanting to do another Final Fantasy matchup, and this one is the one I thought of. Plus, it was a DBX, so I think it would be a pretty cool death battle if it ever gets made. I highly doubt that it'll ever get made, because no one really talks about it, but I've been proven wrong before. Ruby vs. Maka. A big contender for episode 200. The only thing really holding it back is the fact that Rooster Teeth might want Death Battle to wait for Ruby to finish before actually covering Ruby herself on the show, so maybe we will, maybe we won't, we'll have to see. Luz vs. Anne, another matchup from the Tournament of Champions that is super duper popular. That's about it. Don't really care about this one, and I don't really care about Owl House or Amphibia. They could just be erased from existence and I would not care. Spinal vs. Cervantes, a potential Halloween episode that also managed to get a death battle cost this year, so it's definitely plausible. That's about it. I just think seeing Spinal on the show would be really cool. I like his design. Freddy Krueger versus Pennywise the Dancing Clown. I used to be able to do a really good Pennywise impression, now I can't do it anymore. Anyway, this is yet another contender for a Halloween episode. It was also in the Tournament of Champions, so it's clear that both the community and the team want to see it happen someday. That's about it. Think it's a pretty baller matchup. I like it a lot. Okay, this is gonna be a little bit of cheating, but Mickey Mouse versus Bugs Bunny. I don't think we'll get this one this year. What with Wile E versus Tom winning the Tournament of Champions and all, and having two Toon Force episodes in the same season, in my opinion, would just absolutely destroy their budget. I think we're gonna have to wait a while before this happens. Or hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll do it because, well, the Death Battle team are very unpredictable at this point. For this final segment, I just wanted to talk about some personal wants for the season that I could realistically see happening to some extent. Starting with Zero vs. Meta Knight. it has been so damn long since we've had a Kirby episode on this show. And I honestly hope this episode will be the one to prove me wrong when it comes to my predictions, because I really want this matchup. I love Meta Knight, and I love Zero as well. Zero is one of my favorite Mega Man characters, and Meta Knight is one of my favorite Kirby characters. I really hope this happens this season. If not, I'll be fine, but like at this point, please, I'm begging you. Please do this. Swamp Thing versus Man Thing. This is like the one Cosmic Marvel versus DC fight that I actually still want. Mostly because like the cosmic stuff isn't really what defines their characters, like it would for, say, Galactus or Silver Surfer or, I don't know, whoever else. But yeah, I really want this to happen. I love Man Thing, and while I don't really have much of a connection to him, I think Swamp Thing is really cool too. So, I hope, please. Greninja versus Rano. Okay. This one is a little more far-fetched, and no, not like the Pokemon, but I could realistically see it happen. I mean, Greninja is very popular, and Rano is a cool character as well, and it's also Rano's from Rivals of Aether, which hasn't been on the show yet. I think it would be pretty cool to see it happen. Also, I'm biased, Greninja is my favorite Pokemon, and Rano is my main in Rivals of Aether, so please. And finally, just any Blue Beetle matchup that is represented by this really nice thumbnail that I made for Blue Beetle versus Geostellar. Yeah, I feel like after the Blue Beetle versus Ben 10 Death Battle cast, the team would want to have Jaime on the show at some point. Now, I don't really know what matchup they would choose for him. I would say Ben 10, but Gwen versus Eve is more likely, and as much as I want it, I feel like they'd try to go for something other than Jaime versus Geostellar. So, anything can go, really. It depends on what they want, to be honest. Anyway, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're at it, hit that like button as well as the subscribe button. And ring the bell if you want to see any more of my videos in the future. Follow me on my socials, there in the description below. With all that being said, I'll see you later, Cap Nation.